America has a problem. This is Plunge News. America actually has a lot of problems. The one I'm going to be discussing today involves students and inmates. It is no surprise that we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, but also the highest prison population. Our nearest competitor is China. In our prisons, 3/4 are non-violent offenders. The federal prison population actually increased 81% between the years of 1995 and 2003. Not only that, but the sentencing of individuals is racist, with African American drug offenders being sentenced to prison 20% more often than white offenders, and Hispanics 40% more often. Both also receive longer sentences for drug offenses than whites. And here's the kicker. All three groups have the same rate of drug usage. The average cost to incarcerate an individual is $31,286 per year, and range from the low end of $14,603 to a high of $60,076. This is just the first part of this specific problem I see in this country. The other part is education. The education system in this country used to be admired, but in the last several decades, our students have been falling behind those of other countries. People like to blame poor teachers and tenure and teachers' unions, but often overlook things like wealth disparity between schools and school districts, classroom sizes, and costs. Just this last year, a new spending bill came up to vote in my state to allocate more revenue for the local school districts. It would have increased the state income tax, which is a flat rate of 4.63%, to 5% for those earners under $75,000 a year, and those over would pay 5.9%. This increase would have been spent on schools around the state. Per student funding would have increased from $6,652 per year to a projected $7,426 per year. I personally voted for it, seeing how education for the next generation is the future of this country and of the world, but some voted against it. Some people voted against it because they don't like the tax increases. Others voted against it because they don't agree with how the money would have been allocated around the school districts. But this is a problem to discuss another day. The average per pupil expenditure in recent years has been as low as $6,612 per year and as high as $19,698 per year, depending on where you live, with an average about $12,000 per year across the country. This is just K through 12 students. It doesn't include the public portion of federal funding for public colleges and universities, never mind the amount parents will pay or the student loans that will need to be paid back at a later date. To me, this is a travesty, a great injustice. First of all, the system to fund schools is broken, with high poverty areas receiving generally less funding, which contributes to lower proficiency rates. Less educated students end up poorer than better educated students, and I know correlation doesn't equal causation, but there seems to be something here. The other problem I have with this is the difference in spending on prisoners. We shouldn't be sending non-violent drug offenders to deal with violent offenders in prison gangs when there are better and cheaper ways to correct this kind of behavior. Imagine the prison population were half to 1/4 of what it is today. Now imagine that money, as well as other funds, going towards student education, particularly those areas where poverty is rampant and school funding is low. Imagine if the prison population were half to 1/4 of what it is today. Now imagine that money, as well as other funds, going towards student education, particularly those areas where poverty is rampant and school funding is low. Imagine a child going to school to get a warm meal and an education, who then would have a better chance of getting a good job that pays well and helps that child, now an adult, contribute to society, being less likely to be on government assistance and more likely to have children themselves who don't live in poverty. I may be oversimplifying this, and I am aware that the student population is far greater than the prison population, so the total amount of money spent is actually tipped in favor of education. But I do think this is part of the problem. Here in the United States, we are more concerned with a failed war on drugs, with stiffer first-time sentencing for non-violent crimes, with private prisons cutting corners to earn more profit and spend more money lobbying for stiffer penalties and sentencing, and not concerned enough with the future of this country, with one child or all our children who need to be better educated to inherit the world so they can fix the many other problems that we'll be leaving them. It takes a community to raise a child, and anyone who thinks education is too expensive should try ignorance. Thanks for watching.